Welcome to Woodstock, VCF members, staff, board, my family, wherever you are, and friends. For those of you visiting our region today, a very special welcome. Woodstock is in Windsor County, a shire town, home to our county's Superior Court. Did you notice as you approached Billings Farm today that there are no electrical wires or telephone poles in the village? That's thanks in part to Lawrence and Mary's Rockefeller's generosity, ever mindful of tending to this place where they made their second home. A few other random facts. Woodstock is host to 17 Valley Quests, some of the best schools in the state, and home to 5 Liberty Bells. A Guinness World Record was broken on our village green about a decade ago for linking together the longest unbroken chain of people in wheelchairs. Oh, and legend has it, there's a vampire's heart buried under the village green. An event just this past Sunday assembled over 20 regional nonprofits, sponsored by generous donors, individuals and institutions alike, including the Vermont Community Foundation. Our area became well known for its resiliency after being really hard hit by Irene, as many other places in the state were. And perhaps more importantly, a region where truly neighbors are helping neighbors every day. A little personal note here, if you will. I have lived in Woodstock or neighboring Bridgewater for 45 years. While I'm a 5th-generation Californian by birth, Vermont has been my chosen home for the entirety of my adult life. My first professional job brought me to Woodstock in 1975. This place has provided me a deep sense of grounding, purpose, and belonging throughout my life. I was married in 1983, literally in the house on the other side of the sunflowers that you can see. So we're talking about houses that embrace this Billings Farm. In the house of my husband's grandmother, who was a friend, mentor, and philanthropic hero to me long before I met my husband. Our eldest son was married there too, 30 years after we were. This place matters to me. On my husband's side, connections to Vermont go back 5 generations, and I am thrilled, over the moon thrilled, to have 2 of our 3 children who were raised here in Woodstock. They've chosen to return to our region to live, work, and play. In fact, our eldest granddaughter, who's here somewhere today, is being raised 20 minutes from here, and she enjoys coming to Billings Farm, as most kids do. I've used the word chosen a lot in the last couple of minutes. It is crucial to understand the importance that choice plays, or lack thereof, in the lives of Vermonters. Specifically this place, so rich with history, the arts, environmental stewardship, and the spirit of generosity, all guided by a deep sense of the importance of honoring and carrying on in the spirit of giving back. We choose to be responsible in these ways, honoring those who have gone before us. More importantly, striving to live up to their legacy by modeling for our children and grandchildren all that is most important to maintaining health and well-being for everyone who lives here. We are indebted to so many of our local forefathers and mothers whose legacy we strive to uphold. Faulkner, Billings, Williams, Rockefeller, Teagle, and yes, Mertens, to name but a few. Woodstock is often voted one of the prettiest little villages in the United States. Well, that did not happen by accident. These people and so many others were visionaries, giving back of their time and resources in so many ways. Some would argue we are one of the most generous regions in the state, what with our 60-plus nonprofits and networking that occurs every single day to quietly meet the needs of our neighbors. Despite the number of wonderful and intuitive nonprofits whose missions focus on strengthening our communities in one way or another, the contrast in available opportunities is stark, and the struggles many of our region's families experience is real, despite how pretty and generous the region is. If you live here or lingered at all in the village of Woodstock, you can't have missed the empty storefronts. Over half of the houses in our region are owned by second homeowners, and the impact to our schools is profound. While I can say with confidence that we are blessed with some of the best educators in the state, many cannot afford to live within 20 miles of where they teach. And truth be told, some of the schools in which they teach and where they are expected to help our children learn and thrive are crumbling around them. Our well-stocked food shelves are busier than ever. The recent free clothing event was overwhelmingly successful, thanks in large part to community leaders who were witnessing many of our neighbors struggling to get their children outfitted with the basics for the first day of school. Despite our region's many nonprofits and VCF's generous support of so many of those organizations, it hasn't seemed until recently that we were working in collaboration towards a common goal. Of late, it feels like that is changing. The neighborhood-focused approach seems to be emerging across the country, but nowhere is it as customized as it is here in my own community. As we spend more time meeting and listening to one another, we are identifying our strengths and the community leaders who have been doing great stuff for a long time, so we can just continue to build on what's working. In working together, as well as involving civic and business leaders, we are feeling a renewal of sorts that will hopefully take us down a more organized path towards meeting more needs. It's inspirational to be part of a team of people, no matter what we call ourselves, who are working on some of the hardest problems we have. Part of a team that can be counted on to work through the challenges that are getting in the way of creating the kind of community that our children want and can return to. Vermont Community Foundation is committed to doing just that. For this region I call home, and for every other region in Vermont, the VCF is committed to people and organizations who strive to collectively create more opportunities for all of us. We can continue to do better, yes, but today we gather to celebrate all the good work of this past year. Thank you, each of you, for the role you have played in strengthening Vermont communities. And now I have the pleasure of turning the podium over to Dan Smith, President and CEO of the Vermont Community Foundation.
Thank you, Meg. What a wonderful introduction. It's great to be here today on this beautiful day and look out and see so many friendly and familiar faces and a few new ones as well. So thank you for joining us. And thank you, David, for ordering up such a beautiful afternoon. Wow, Meg, you didn't leave much for me to say. I think it's a fitting metaphor for the idea of closing the opportunity gap and this sense of recovery that goes into that work in our communities when we're here today in a farm like this, and what Frederick Billings saw when he got here and he came back and what it has turned into and what it became. It's also a fitting location to think about this work over the course of decades, which is, I think, the lens and horizon that it's really important for philanthropy to consider. So thank you for hosting us, David, and thank you for the help and support of your staff here at the farm. So We do have a little bit of business to conduct at the annual meeting every year involving our directors and membership and our governance. So I want to start, speaking of decades, by thanking two outgoing directors, Tim Voke and Jake Wheeler, who collectively have nearly 20 years worth of time spent on the board, and both of whom served as chairs of the board. So if you both would come up, I want to just present you with a token of our gratitude. First, I do think Jake is looking forward to spending a little more time fishing and skiing rather than just giving me advice, but it's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
And then Tim, I have to tell a story about Tim.
Is it a skiing story?
It's not a skiing story, you know. But so Tim was board chair during the last CEO transition, and I was actually standing in the parking lot at Dartmouth Hitchcock, having just walked out of a doctor's appointment, an ultrasound, where the technician shared that we were having identical twin boys. And then
I remember that.
I'm trying to gather my thoughts, and my phone rings, and it's Tim offering me the opportunity to join the VCF as president and CEO. And you can imagine it's a moment I'll hold forever. I went out and bought 3 lottery tickets because I thought, you know, it's got to be my lucky day. I did not win with the scratch offs, but you know, I can benchmark my tenure to the birth of my sons Andrew and Lucas, and it is a moment I'll hold forever. So thank you both for all of your advice and support, not just of me, but of the VCF. We're a stronger organization today than we've, I think, ever been, and a lot is due to your leadership and advice and counsel over the years. So thank you both very much.
Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
So after the program, anybody who wants to congratulate them, we're going to release them into the corn maze out back. That was a joke. Thanks for laughing. I also want to make a note of appreciation. We had 2 founding directors who passed away this past year, Fred Hackett and Sally Soule. And I think it's a fitting metaphor for a community foundation that 2 people whose politics diverged could come together around the idea that an organization like this filled a need for the state and offer a platform for enduring philanthropy that builds strong communities and enables neighbors to support neighbors. So we were saddened by their passing, but every piece of work we do is a piece of their legacy as leaders. So. Okay, the nominating report. On behalf of the board, I'm happy to share every August we do a written ballot of our membership, 180 odd members across the state. We elect new members to that group, and we elect new directors. I'd like you to join me in welcoming our incoming directors, Kathy Austin of Orleans County and Hal Colston of Chittenden County. If Kathy and Hal could both stand. And actually, while we're at it, if the other directors who are in attendance could please stand also and just be recognized. Hope you'll also join me in welcoming the new incoming members who were elected by the members of my ballot this August from all over the state. Thank you all for being a part of the Vermont Community Foundation. As a growing organization, you'll see some new faces around the tent today and in the office during the years to come. Brockton Corbett, Sarah DeLuzio, Bobby Lucier, Heather Seeley, and Jamie Stone have all joined us in the last year. Brockton and Bobby Brockton is the inaugural David Rahr Fellow in Community Philanthropy, and Bobby Lucier is the new High Meadows Fellow, supporting the High Meadows Fund. Okay. So it's important to take a moment at the annual meeting every year to ground ourselves in our work. We're an organization that believes we're better together. We're here to inspire giving, we're here to bring people and resources together, and we're here to make a difference in Vermont. So central to the ways in which we make a difference in Vermont is our grant making. I'm really excited to share that in 2018, we saw the largest grant making year in our history, $18.1 million. It's safe to say that our grant making should go up on an annual basis, but to highlight our growth, we've gone from $13 million in 2016 to $18 million in 2018. And in 2019, with a full quarter to go, we've already eclipsed our 2018 grant making total. We're not an organization that sits idly on its resources. Some additional perspective. A $3,000 general operating grant to the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, I see Breck out there, last September from a donor-advised fund of the VCF, put us over $250 million of grants made through the foundation since our inception. Some additional context. In the first 5 years, the average annual grant making by the VCF was about $245,000 per year. Last year, we granted $245,000 every 5 days. Those are dollars that are going to work in Vermont communities every single day, changing lives, representing the commitment of neighbors to help neighbors. It's easy to think of a foundation as an institution, kind of 4 walls, bricks, mortar, gray concrete, but the reality is we're about people. We're only as strong as our partners, and we are only effective because of the hard work of people here today and many who aren't. So let me say to our donors and our fund holders, thank you. The grant making I just described is driven by more than 850 charitable funds and foundations, nonprofit reserve and endowments. Like I said, these are neighbors helping neighbors, Vermonters looking out for each other. It's humbling to sit with somebody and know that their legacy is our responsibility. Our job is to inspire their giving by helping those families, those individuals, find and fund the causes they care about in the places they love. I also want to take a moment and thank the estate attorneys, the accountants, the financial planners, and professional advisors who understand why and how philanthropy should be a part of their clients' planning. These advisors, and there are many here today, they're community-minded supporters of Vermont philanthropy. Their expertise and trust is a quiet catalyst for giving in Vermont at a scale that would otherwise be out of reach. So thank you. And philanthropy is only as effective as those who do the work, day in and day out, with vision and heart and compassion and sacrifice, and probably not enough gratitude. So let me say to you, on behalf of everyone we work with, thank you to the nonprofit partners who make all of this possible. Thank you. Some of our greatest impact is through some of our closest partners. In 2018, our supporting organizations put $9 million to work in Vermont communities. Those supporting organizations are the J. Warren and Lois McClure Foundation, whose mission is to ensure that no job in Vermont goes unfilled for lack of a qualified applicant. Let's Grow Kids, whose vision is universal access to high-quality early care and child and education by 2025. The Curtis Fund, which represents more than a 100-year legacy of providing scholarship aid to Vermonters for college and career training. The High Meadows Fund, which builds community resilience in the face of a changing climate. And the Addison Community Athletics Foundation, promoting health and vitality through athletics, collaboration, and community. Additionally, over $1 million of grant making came from community-advised funds. These are funds guided by community members who come together and volunteer their time and spend hundreds of hours considering how to make a difference on the issues and in the places they care about. These include focus area funds like the Vermont Women's Fund, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. The Samara Fund, the Arts Endowment Fund, and regional funds like the Walter Surf Community Fund, Crosby Gannett, and Dunham Mason, and the new Opportunity Fund for Southshire Youth. Starting in 2018, the VCF made a commitment to seed the Opportunity Fund for Southshire Youth And along with assets raised from additional donors, this fund and other programs at the VCF supported an array of work in Bennington County that's very exciting. And of course, the Northeast Kingdom Fund. I have the joy of sharing that through the generosity of donors, the hard work of our philanthropy team, and especially I want to acknowledge Emily Pilo Corbett and her work, the work of the NEK Fund Committee, including Jake Wheeler, and I think I saw Charlie Brown in back. The NEK Fund has actually grown to over $1 million, permanently held to support the vitality of Kingdom communities. I want to highlight another important tool we use to make a difference. Since 2001, the Foundation has committed 5% of our pooled assets to Vermont-based mission investments. At present, we're managing over $13.5 million in business and revitalization projects, including Mamava, a Burlington startup that builds and installs lactation pods for nursing moms, the Wilson Block in Springfield, a mixed-use project that will provide affordable apartments, including some dedicated to serving youth experiencing homelessness. And the Greater Burlington YMCA was supported through the creative use of a loan guarantee to aid the construction of their new facility. All told, across all of our work, grants, mission investments, program expenses, the VCF brought more than $36 million to bear on its mission in 2018. Financial stewardship is key to our success. The strength of our finance team and our dedication to strong financial controls is a vital driver of the trust and the confidence that families and fund holders put in the Community Foundation. I'm pleased to announce that we had another clean audit this year, adding to a long string of clean audits. We're proud of that, and we're motivated to continue it. We also believe in the strength of our investment strategies. We invest with an eye towards a 20-year horizon. Last year marked a transition to a period of increasing volatility and more challenging times. And while through June 30th of this year, our long-term pool returned a one-year investment at 3.5%, the current year today is north of 10%, and over 7 years, we're well ahead of the benchmark at 8%. It's key to be ahead of that benchmark for the long term. And our socially responsible investment pool, we recently retooled to include a stronger, more proactive values framework that considers the impact of these managed assets. And nearly all, this is an important market signal among philanthropists and folks who are working through the foundation, but nearly all of the new donor-advised funds that were opened in 2018 opted into this socially responsible impact pool. And the 7-year performance of that pool is actually stronger than the traditional long-term pool. Total assets of the foundation. Most foundations would lead with this metric. We choose to lead with the metrics and the numbers that describe the impact of our work together. But we closed 2018 with $323 million of assets under management. I think it's important to acknowledge for two reasons. One, it's these underlying assets that allow the impact that we seek through our family of fund holders, our partners in the organization. They make it possible. It's important to acknowledge because it also hasn't always been this way. There are some in this crowd who remember the day and how meaningful it was when Dave Rahr and Mac and Lois McClure celebrated the pivotal gift that put us over $5 million. I want to extend our gratitude to everyone who's been a part of this over time. And before I go further and make some additional observations about our work to close the opportunity gap in Vermont, I want to pause and invite Vermont poet Laura Foley up to share a reading. Laura, come on up. Laura lives right down the road in Pomfret, so please join me in welcoming Laura.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you for offering a pause and calling this a pause. So the first poem I'll read is called What Stillness, and most of the poems I read today now will be set. I live 5 miles from here. In a radius of 5 miles of this spot is where most of the poems are set. This one is actually Mount Tom. What stillness. Lily pads ripple in summer breeze as if they bloomed for me. Revelation white clouds float through a divine blue sky. No human voices break the stillness of this hilltop pond where I come to forget the foolishness of Homo sapiens. where a trout leaps from the lake, splashes shining down, opening a glimpse into the world below the surface. My dog, wet from her swim between the visible and hidden, shakes dots of sparkling light from her dark coat, forming a watery aura. What sunlight does to water, stillness does to us. Thank you. This poem is called The Hill, and it's set in our house in Pomfret, and this is dedicated to my wife, Clara. The hill, it rises above our house like a sentinel growing sapling trees, and it occurs to me we could cut and stack some, let them dry in the barn we don't yet have, for the animals we don't own yet. But I imagine the hill is willing to host, fantasy or reality, chickens for sure because of the eggs, goats because she loves them, maybe a lamb for the same reason. We'll burn the wood in fires I'll build in our fireplace as we toast with hot chocolate, the hill protecting us from winter's coldest winds. She'll wear a helmet and leg protectors, cut the thinner maples and birch, as together we clear a gradual rocky path up the greatest slope. We'll get married this summer on the lawn. Not hers, but ours, our farm with chickens, goats, a barn, the steep path rising above the house, allowing a heavenly view, hidden from us as we go about the business of living, but revealed each time we climb to the summit for the perspective of someone watching over us. Thank you. This one is really a late October type of poem called What the Dead Miss. This morning I think I see in the light, dimpling the river's emerald green beneath me, the faces of my dead husband, my parents and younger sister. Feel their fingers in the fresh breeze on my cheeks as I breathe the diesel smell of passing trucks, reminding me of my need to refuel. As I hold the nozzle in place, I watch clouds scurry and reform like roving, ghostly crowds. I hear music in the liquid trickling, filling my tank to the brim. Music in my steady footsteps, tapping percussion on pavement, the car door closing with a click. They say that's what the dead miss most. An ordinary day spent like this. And now the season that is going to be coming toward us fairly soon. When I went out this morning, nothing unusual happened to me, only my cleats keeping time on icebound earth. My dog's easy loping alongside, belying her claws, clicking percussion. Down a hill so steep in the newborn sun, I nearly miss fox tracks leading to woods. The piteousness of doves cooing over our heads, reflecting wing lights winking like eyes as they pass. Nothing special to see when I went out this morning. Thank you. And I will end with a poem which is, we like to go to Cape Cod sometimes in the summer. And the nice balance, the ocean and the hills of Vermont. Gratitude list. Praise be this morning for sleeping late, the sandy sheets, the ocean air, the midnight storm that blew its waters in. Praise be the morning swim mid-tide, the clear sands underneath our feet, the dogs who leap into the waves, their fur sticky with salt, the ball we throw again and again. Praise be the green tea with honey, the bread we dip in finest olive oil, the eggs we fry. Praise be the reeds, gold and pink in the summer light, the sand between our toes, our swimsuits flapping in the breeze. Thank you very much.
That was lovely. Thank you, Laura. So, no matter when we got here or where we came from, we are all Vermonters, but we don't all experience Vermont life through the same lens. It's not a given that our kids show up to kindergarten ready to learn. It's not a given that they get their homework done, come to school rested and well-fed. And it's not a given that people decide to continue their education or training after high school. None of this happens as a matter of course, despite what our experience and our own circle may tell us. It's not a given that we feel connected to this place and each other and feel a sense of potential for the future when we walk down the street. There's a gap in how we experience all of those things. And that gap is dangerous to the idea of community that we hold dear. What affects one of us affects all of us. The opportunity gap represents something that should make us all very uncomfortable. The idea that the odds of your success in life depend more on family and geography of your birth than anything else. And in any particular place, the systems that drive the experience of our neighbors are intertwined. If we try to consider or describe or think about philanthropy with a single grant, a single project, or a single program or a single issue, we limit ourselves to considering one piece of a complex community puzzle. And while that piece undoubtedly makes a difference, it sits in a broader context. As a community foundation, it's important that we embrace the singularity of each piece without losing sight of the entire puzzle, if we hope to be effective over time. We're challenging ourselves to do that across the state through focused engagement, local and regional partnership, and a range of grant making and mission investing. That's how we believe we can help build momentum. Some examples where we're doing that work, that focused engagement at Springfield, Bennington County, and the Northeast Kingdom, each with individual personalities and characteristics, each with incredible energy in the face of serious economic and social challenges. So I want to dive into each of those places a little bit and just highlight some of our work. Our goal is to understand the heart of these places and to know how to make a difference. In Springfield, our work to close the opportunity gap is reflected in a number of projects and partnerships, including the All for One after-school program, a student-led and directed teen center offered as a course in the local high school. The impact is not just the space and the program, it's the experience of a group of young people who made something happen in their town. We're joined today by a couple of those young people and their mentors. Are they out there? Oh, it's standing in the back. Thanks for coming. With the Edgar May Community Center, we help bring people together for a youth and family wellness fair. We made an early grant to the Black River Innovation Campus, focused on expanding the digital economy, educating and training people in digital skills, launching startups, and recruiting companies to the Park Street Accelerator. BRIC has since leveraged national foundation philanthropy and public funding through the Northern Borders Regional Commission. We used our mission investments to strengthen the downtown by partnering with Housing Vermont on the Wilson block, as I mentioned earlier. Let's Grow Kids, Make Way for Kids program made grants creating 28 additional high-quality child care slots in the region around Springfield. The Curtis Fund, another supporting organization, supported 49 scholarship recipients in Windsor County. The Women's Fund, the Vermont Community Foundation, the McClure Foundation co-funded a computational thinking curriculum in the local school district. A note on McClure. The McClure Foundation right now is scaling up to over $600,000 a year in grant making to ensure that the training pathways to Vermont's highest paying and most in-demand jobs are visible, accessible, and affordable. That includes over $200,000 a year in support of the many ways that the Community College of Vermont is offering affordable college and career training across the state. McClure has been funding this issue in Vermont for a decade now. They're challenging themselves and other funders to invest not just in programs, but in changes to the systems and the infrastructure that will drive stronger communities and healthier economic development. In Bennington, the Bennington region, I mentioned earlier the Opportunity Fund for Southshire Youth. We also partnered with the Center for Restorative Justice Youth Empowerment Program, designed to foster team building and leadership skills among youth facing poverty. Hunger Free Vermont, an expansion of the summer meals program in partnership with Bennington College. Broader engagement from the VCF led to an expansion of youth mentoring programs by DREAM. The Alliance for Community Transformation is empowering LGBTQ youth by creating space for them to speak with community leaders and parents about the challenges they face every day. Team Electra for girls at the Youth Hacks Academy, designed to build confidence with technology tools, digital design, critical thinking, and best practices for pitching their work. We partnered with CCV and Bennington College on their efforts to support juniors and seniors on the path to college. At least 66% of Mount Anthony Union High School students would be the first in their family to attend college, a rate far higher than the Vermont average. And Let's Grow Kids Make Way for Kids program helped develop 25 new high-quality childcare spaces in the region. The Curtis Fund, 25 scholarship recipients in 2018 in Bennington County. We supported the Lightning Jar, a co-working space with programming that supports strong connections to local entrepreneurs. Supported the Town of Bennington Rescue Squad and their strategic planning. And we made a $500,000 equity investment in the Putnam Block revitalization, a major effort for a historic, high-visibility downtown location. And a VCF fund holder contributed an additional $100,000. Again, it's the intersection of all these pieces in place that makes the work of the VCF and philanthropy so powerful. And in the Northeast Kingdom, we benefited from the insight of partners like the Vermont Council on Rural Development community visit process. We've also partnered with the NEK Collaborative to leverage their regional insight. Programs through the VCF supported the Craftsbury Saplings and the Newport Early Childhood Center. In all, Make Way for Kids created or enhanced more than 100 childcare slots in the 3 Northeast Kingdom counties. We funded First Home, a housing project for mothers struggling with substance use disorder. First Home offers wraparound support and was co-funded by a $200,000 donor advised fund commitment. We supported Umbrella, offering low-income women who have experienced trauma and addiction, training for skills to gain and maintain employment. McClure has supported 3 years of the Kingdom Career Connect program for area 8th graders held at NVU Linden. And a co-funded program between VCF and McClure is offering Community College of Vermont courses to incarcerated inmates at Newport Correctional. In the 3 counties of the Kingdom, the Curtis Fund supported 49 scholarship recipients in 2018. And our mission investments, the High Meadows Fund and the VCF, are both investors in High Mowing Seeds, an organic seed company that sits on the edge of the kingdom and is the largest employer in 4 surrounding towns, and offering a living wage to many kingdom residents. And of course, you have the NEK Fund itself, enduring philanthropy by the kingdom, for the kingdom, guided by the voices of kingdom communities. These aren't exhaustive. They may be exhausting. But there is more work by our supporting organizations and projects I didn't mention, along with our cornerstone partners, folks like Vermont After School, Launch VT, and the Vermont Council on Rural Development. The point of these examples is to better understand how the work of philanthropy and the work we do together intersects on the ground. Key to that work is the need to ask and listen and live the value of curiosity. What does it mean for Vermont to be at its best and Vermonters to be at their best? Over the course of the last 3 years, our annual meeting has set a tone of inquiry. In 2016, we talked about a willingness to explore. In 2017, we drew out the invisible voices of the opportunity gap. Last year, it was a provocative message from economist Richard Reeves asking us each to consider and own the rigidity of economic standing in our communities. And this year, we want to tease out the question of the next 30 years. What might Vermont be like in 2050? As a state, we've struggled to change the conditions that hold our challenges in place. To paraphrase my colleague Carolyn Weir, we are program rich and systems poor. And yet those systems are precisely where philanthropy needs to go to work. In 2050, a child born today will be 30 years old. What will they have to know how to do? How will they learn it? What will define their lived experience, their community? What will determine whether they thrive or struggle? Will their children be the second generation in Vermont welcomed by universal access to childcare? 30 years is a long time. It's hard to imagine. We hear that. It's hard to step back and consider the span of decades. Think of the gap between 1989 and 2019. Jake was just coming off on the board, I think, in 1989. That was a joke. Think of the gap between 1959 and 1989. If it's hard for us to even imagine, the next question we have to ask is actually about trust. How much trust do we have in the systems that we've built to guide us to our fullest potential? Are we up to it? Are we up to it civically? Are we up to it socially? Are we up to it economically or ecologically? Which of these systems will even exist? Food and farming, education from cradle to career, products, industry, occupation, transportation. Over the next 30 years, each of these and many more could just be fundamentally different. The next recession will devastate young Vermonters and young Americans. Already unlikely to earn more than their parents, they also hold more debt and never recovered from the last recession. Our population and workforce are out of balance. Wired magazine noted that Vermont is #1 in the country for the departure of well-educated 30-year-olds. The Joint Fiscal Office just released a report describing the departure and quantifying the departure of working and middle-class Vermonters. The Public Assets Institute shares that we have the highest poverty rate in New England for 18 to 34-year-olds by 6 percentage points. Right now, we just leave too many Vermonters behind based on where they're from, who their families are, and what they look like. And the systems that drive that imbalance pull us further and further apart with long-term civic, social, and economic consequences. When the rules are arbitrary, whether it is a flawed meritocracy in education, unjust policing, or an economy that leaves behind the residents of small towns, it's not hard to understand why people turn away from institutions on which they should be able to rely. How do we create space for those who turn away from institutions to turn towards their neighbors? It is that connection that will spawn the creativity and ingenuity that carries us to 2050. Philanthropy may not have the ability to solve it all, but we have the obligation to aspire and to do so over time. For us, that task is informed by living the value of curiosity, focusing on places like Springfield and Bennington in the Northeast Kingdom, and listening for the ways we can help build momentum over the arc of decades. It is a task that must be informed by a discussion with Vermonters, both those within our sphere and those from many other walks of life. So we've started asking, what do you see when you picture Vermont in 2050? The answers we're hearing matter more than any crafted, scripted, facilitated planning exercise that might happen within the four walls of the foundation. The answers matter because we aren't simply a foundation, we're a community foundation. Any thought we put into the future must reflect the voices of people who live and work and laugh and cry and dream here. A discussion about Vermont at mid-century isn't just an exercise in choosing a path, it's an exercise in bridging ideas and finding the points of connection within a kaleidoscope of hopes. That is not a straightforward goal. It is a difficult one. We work within bubbles. Sometimes we're aware of them, often we're not. When we walk into a room talking about the future and we recognize every face, it may be comfortable, but it should be a little troubling. So you're about to hear how some Vermonters answered this question. Leading up to today, we conducted hours of interviews with dozens of Vermonters across the state. These are Vermont voices. Some you may recognize and some you may not. Some are people we've known for years. Others are new voices and friends we've just made. Some of those folks made it today. I want to say thank you for helping us. I wish we could have used all of the hours of footage. I'm grateful for the input and insight that we have and can work with over time, and your contributions are both welcome, valued, and will go to work over time. This is just a summary, and it tries to capture the themes that we heard. These voices are intended to advance us down this path of inquiry, a longer conversation that we must have. It's not scientific, but it's a start. I want to acknowledge again that projecting out 3 decades isn't easy. It's not easy for an organization. It's not easy for the people we talk to. The future is an abstraction. And one perspective may be so fundamentally different from the next that they seem irreconcilable. All the more reason for us to listen well enough to find the points of connection in that kaleidoscope of hope. So here are some of the things we heard when we asked, what do you see when we picture Vermont at 2050? First, we heard how important it will be to be humble and to keep listening.
How do we ensure a better future for 2050? For me, that means more collaboration across the board and listening to the voices of people who have typically been left out of the conversation.
In order to solve problems, we need to find the roots and put the resources, the expertise, the knowledge into making sure that those roots are stopped from growing. Work with people who are on the ground, working with those population. What are the concerns, and taking those concerns and exploring them and solving them, and then we can move all forward.
We in the public now see as much research that starts out with a conclusion and develops answers that will support the conclusion, as opposed to finding out what the conclusion actually might be.
There's so much good practice in terms of just returning to what's basic and simple, assessing students by sitting with them and listening to them. To sit with is the Latin root of assess, and one of my own mentors taught me that.
Sometimes I think one of the most effective means of communication is to just shut up and listen, and really, humble yourself to the possibility that you don't have a clue.
People shared a deep belief and conviction that difference will be a source of strength for Vermont over the next 30 years.
Vermont, I think, is all about its own progressivism. I think it's also blind to its prejudice. It's blind to its racism, to its classism, and we need to work on that, or we're not going to progress as far as we need or want to.
Acceptance is not a passive act. Acceptance is not the idea that, there are people with differences and I'm going to sit back and not interfere in their lives. Acceptance, to me, is really championing the idea of being included.
I know Abenaki people will be here. I want to make sure our tribes survive. We have our language to preserve. We have our culture and our traditions, and we need to really make it okay for our children to be proud of who they are.
For hundreds of years, we've talked about America being this land of opportunity, and it really was opportunity for one specific group of people, and now we're saying, well, wait a minute, let's really look at that. Were women given the same opportunity? Were people of, different genders or sexual identities given the opportunity? Were people of color given those opportunities? And now we're admitting, I think, that no, that's not at all.
Looking back from when I was in high school here, I knew that diversity was not here. We didn't learn about that in school. It was the typical textbook stuff. But now I think kids are starting to understand that they might have classmates that don't look like them, and that's okay. Again, how can we embrace that? What can we teach in our schools? The raising of the Black Lives Matter flag was huge for Rutland City. And that was done by a group of students going to the school board and advocating for themselves and for what's right. I mean, that is incredible. And that's following, South Burlington and other schools throughout the state whose students had the courage, really, to stand up for what's right and make the change themselves. I mean, I couldn't imagine going to my superiors in high school, 16, 17, and really demanding that this needs to be done. And it needs to be done not only because it shows that we're inclusive and that we accept diversity, but because it's the right thing to do. And student leadership and student advocating for one another, if that continues, our youth are going to be very successful no matter where they go.
Vermont, we have new people from different countries, from Africa, Asia, and places outside of America. They come and join our community. We are reunited as a family.
We were told to pay attention to the next generation and be ready to let their voices lead. And if that's so, what of our own beliefs are we prepared to compromise for the sake of community?
I remember being on a panel in the Upper Valley, and everyone was going around and saying, what is their biggest concern? And everyone that went ahead of me said, our biggest concern is how many people are moving to the area. There are so many people here, and we're starting to deal with traffic on Ledyard Bridge, and we're concerned about all the people. And it came around to me, and I realized, A, I was the youngest person in the room by 15 years and the only person that had grown up there. And I said, well, I got to tell you, I think the biggest concern I have is we don't have enough people. And we don't have enough people who are filling out the entire range of ages. And if we continue down that trajectory, we'll end up in real trouble.
Up to now, it's always been that the next generation will live just as well as you did or even better. I think that that's fading across the country, and I hope that doesn't happen here.
I was with a young lady last spring in the principal's office with her family, and she was not yet of the age where she could effectively opt out of school, but she was close. And she, with tears streaming down her face, was effectively telling her family to stop lying to me about how great things are going to be. No, I'm not thinking about that career anymore. She was seeing her world for what it was, which was a world troubled by what demographers and journalists and others are calling diseases of despair.
We need to talk to our youth, and we need to bring them to the table much earlier than we do. You know, here in Rutland County, we have a great Young Professionals Association, and they're really great at saying, how can you make these decisions without us present? And we have had to change our mindset and invite them in, mostly because they're knocking at the door saying, you know, we want to roll in this. And how can we get even earlier and younger and make sure that the young people in our communities say in what we're doing? It's their future.
People shared a range of thoughts about the changing nature of industry, work, and jobs.
Waterbury is a great example where you had a base of manufacturing and coffee, you know, just populating this other place, you know, that drew a ton of, you know, economic security for the people that live in around that and for everyone. I mean, you needed every worker, every maker, every doer, every problem solver, operator, technician. You know, there were just jobs that could lift all ships, essentially. When you start to lose your manufacturing sector in the spread of the state, in those places that become those hubs elsewhere, it's really dangerous because nothing can replace it. There just isn't the volume of jobs to put that many hands to work elsewhere. We need to be thoughtful about how to make sure we just sort of set up the economics of manufacture in a way that creates those hubs of massive jobs in multiple locations throughout the state. And when we have them, protect them at all costs. Do not let them fall down and exit the state.
One of the things that has happened in the last 30 years is that entrepreneurship has been on the decline, particularly in rural America and in proportion to population. And as we know, the entrepreneurs of today are the employers of tomorrow. So one of the primary tenets is that you've got to be building a place and space for entrepreneurs to come, be able to build out their company, and then be successful in transitioning to a more mature operation. You also need the talent pool that's coming up.
We really need to pay attention to the innovators and the makers and those who are creating new and different things.
Things like co-working spaces and like general community spaces are going to be that much more important for people to be able to come together and work together.
I also would want to see in the next 30 years like big companies such as, you know, Amazon or Microsoft to have also, you know, their affiliates in here.
No conversation today in Vermont can happen without observations on the age and size of our population.
It's going to be really crucial over the next 20 years, 30 years to attract people to our region.
It's a tough one to crack because if people get their degrees in college and leave, part of your workforce goes. And we haven't had much in the way of population increase. We need people to grow. You know, you need a workforce, and the population is aging out.
Caregiving is a huge issue. We're starting to see that now when the baby boomers get closer to the point where they need much more care. Is that population of people going to be there?
I mean, every room I get into, every board that I'm on,
As a 43-year-old man, I'm one of the youngest people in the room, if not the youngest. And that scares me. And thinking about 31 years out from that, what that's going to look like if we don't get more people moving here is scary.
Another recurring theme is the idea of connection and community, and the role of our downtowns and what makes those strong and dynamic.
Weybridge, the town I live in, has a town picnic every July. And it's a potluck, and it's at the school, and we actually sit down and eat together at tables. Like, those are the kinds of things that I think churches traditionally convened. And then there's been this long erosion of that kind of community as people have lost faith. So these nodes of connection that are physical, that are serving lots of different purposes at once, where people are networking, they can let people know, like, I'm in the market for a new job. Like, do you have any ideas? You know, they can help people find childcare. They can help people if they need elder care, they've had a tragedy in their life. They can also help people if they are excited about something and really want people to celebrate with. So all those things need to be happening. And I think that the synagogue, the church, those are our models, and I think those can be revived. But if that isn't where it's at for people, I think we need to create them.
For me, when I think about 2050, I think about more community. So 2050 to me is when I go to the library, there is a garden shed that I can rent my lawnmower from. It's a place where I can go have my technology repaired because there's a repair clinic. It's a place where the librarian can connect me to someone who, depending on what we're looking at for vehicle use, who can connect me with someone to take me somewhere. It's more about having local resources that are easily accessible and bring people together rather than more consumerism and more division.
So much has moved online, but I do think that people are always going to be looking for experiences. And so a lot of downtowns, for example, are really focusing on, recreation, events, more participatory spaces because people want to be with other people.
We joke sometimes that the real core to rural economic development are the 3 Bs, which are broadband, blues, and beer, because you got to have the fundamental infrastructure, but then you've got to have the ways of creating density, even in a rural place.
Historically, we define the success of a town by the number of shops that were filled with prosperous shopkeepers. That standard doesn't work anymore. If that's the standard we use, we're going to be very disappointed because the world has moved on. We order, whatever we need on our mobile devices, and it arrives the very next day. So we have to sort of redefine our towns, our downtowns for that reason. There'll still be great shops and reasons to come, but the historic reasons, the historic vision of a small town, whether it was in Vermont or California, it doesn't really matter, I think is changing, and we have to reinvent our small towns because we're not going to have all those hundreds of little stores that we used to have. Those days are gone, and they're not coming back. And I think if that's the standard by which we judge our progress and our status, we're going to be disappointed.
I want to see a use for the mall that's emptied out over time. It doesn't have to be a mall. It's a good structure. It's solid. We can use it for other things. It just takes money. Yeah, that's all. And a sense of vision and some hard work.
People's observations about climate change, of which there were many, had nuance. There was frustration and resignation, along with a resilience reflected in the idea that we need to be prepared for its consequences, like the potential for mass migration.
I met my first climate refugee 3 months ago, and they had lived in New Orleans. They had made it through Katrina, and then they were looking at projections weather-wise of what it would look like for their home with rising sea levels and generally what would look like weather-wise there and climate-wise. And they realized that their home would be gone in 15 years. Just flat out, it would not be there anymore. It would be underwater. So they did their research and they said, okay, well, we got to move because we're not doing this again. We lived through Katrina. We're not rebuilding. We're done. And they looked at Virginia, and then they looked at Maryland. You know, like they're moving up the coast trying to figure out where to go. They looked at California, and they settled on Norwich, Vermont, because they felt it was like the safest place they could be while also being close to large urban hubs. And I think that calculus is happening more and more, and we're going to see waves of people who are moving to Vermont.
My greatest fears, climate change. I have seen that in my life. And I actually enjoy it because I like the challenge of dealing with new situations. We have gone through so many changes in our agricultural system, and we've always managed to find a new niche. I hope we can do that within 30 years because I wish that my farm that has been farmed for hundreds of years will be able to continue to be a viable farm.
People shared a sense that we don't know ourselves maybe as well as we should, that we need to reconnect with Vermonters who are hidden from view and honor their experience, not just the story about Vermont we tell ourselves.
When people think about people who are homeless, you imagine someone standing on the street, standing on the corner. We get a little bit of that in this area, but it's really minimal. And especially with family homelessness, that's something that tends to be very hidden. You see a lot of people who are doubling up in housing, who are scraping by to stay in a hotel rather than be on the street or camping with their families. So I think it is a really hidden issue.
There's no other way to know, that there's all these youth in the woods living in tents. They're not, you drive on the freeway or even get off, the exit, you're not going to see those youth.
Socioeconomics is definitely a crisis in Vermont. It's something that people don't want to talk about. It's something that is getting worse by the minute, and it is so much of a causal issue of so many other issues in Vermont that are what are being addressed rather than really looking at the root cause and seeing the connection between health and addiction and violence, all rooted down to people don't have opportunity, people don't have a sense of agency to be in control of their own lives and empowered to feel like their voice matters.
The Champlain Housing Trust was trying to develop recovery housing in 40th and Allen, and that recently got some pretty vocal pushback. In that meeting, I don't think there were any people that weren't affiliated with the recovery community or recovery housing in that meeting to champion or to push back. I mean, there were the employees to say, hey, we think this is a good idea. But the reality is there was no one to say, no, you're wrong, when someone said these people are less deserving than us of stable housing.
People felt strongly that along the way, over the course of the next 30 years, we need to be ready to navigate fear, risk, and complacency.
There's a certain amount of Vermont exceptionalism that I've encountered where Vermonters are really like, okay, community, oh yeah, we've got that. Small towns, like we're all about that. Environment, yes, of course. We don't have billboards. We've been green since whatever. And yes, that is true, but I also think that it leads to a little bit of complacency.
Sometimes I feel like the philanthropic community, gets a little bit myopically focused on metrics. I think that there is a broader, sort of cultural story, and there are many, and many stories embedded within that sort of make up the fabric of that cultural story. And I think it's like taking the time to really try to hear and understand those stories is sometimes just as important, if not more important, than whatever the numbers are telling us.
I wonder if our community foundations, if you will, the bedrock of our communities are strong enough for the changes that may come.
I think philanthropy has a certain amount of fear baked into it. Nobody likes failure. And certainly, if you're a philanthropic organization and you're funding projects, you do not want to be associated with failure. You want to have a record of success. Where do we want to go? You talk about the future. Ask that to the philanthropist. Where do they want to go? What do they want this world to look like? Risk is something that a farmer does every year as they plant seed. There are no guarantees.
I think about the 1950s, where life seemed a little bit more collaborative. We had just come out of Depression and the second war to end all wars. And there was a sense that, thank God we're not speaking German or Japanese, but we survived because a lot of people did things that they never thought they were capable of. And they did come together, and they helped neighbors out. And there were obviously all sorts of, flaws in that, but overall it was the mindset of we can do it.
I think despite other things that are happening in the country, we stay focused and determined and not give up, because I know it's easy to get down, but I feel that, we embrace one another and, put our talents to the test, that we could be an awesome Vermont.
These are voices of our neighbors. We can be an awesome Vermont. Here's the thing. There's no clear path through the course of decades, but we know from these voices that the experience of our neighbor defines our own experience. We know that we need to steer against the forces that pull us apart. We know we need to find ways to bridge different perspectives into shared connections. There is so much hope and faith that these connections can be strong in Vermont. But our instinct can't be to retreat to what is familiar and easy. What's fascinating about work that keeps community in the center is that it isn't any one issue or trend that defines it. It's how many trends fit together that inform whether two neighbors can walk down the same road, clear-eyed and knowing that their stories are tied together, and confident in the resilience that comes from a shared sense of potential, hope, and connection. Our goal of closing the opportunity gap is about rebuilding that common ground. What are the tools and investments and tactics that get us there? We have ideas, but truthfully, we have so much more to learn. That's the nature of inquiry. Can we truly hear the voices of those we seek to serve? The shakiness of where we are as a country right now is apparent. To paraphrase Jonathan Franzen's recent New Yorker piece, kindness to neighbors will be essential in a crisis in whatever society survives it. Or James Fallows in The Atlantic just last week, just a little more optimistically, arguing that the teetering and tottering of our federal architecture will unleash astounding new energy to address problems at a local level. When change is so hard to predict, let alone drive, it takes hope and vision to guide us. Vermont is at its best when we look out for each other. We have equal access to opportunity. We understand and respect each other. We live in balance with the environment. We engage in civic life. We're healthy, inspired, and feel a sense of potential. Fallows again, the world changes as we live in it. We're all part of a pattern that we can glimpse only dimly. Whatever the course of decades delivers to Vermont, community and the common experiences that tie neighbor to neighbor are the beating heart of our progress. That we heard in these voices. We also heard hope and faith in each other. Let's not lose track of it. Let's keep listening. Let's keep asking. On the tables at the back of the tent, there are drop boxes and note cards. We've set up an email address, and there's a hashtag for those of you on Twitter. Our commitment is that our work is informed by the unique intersections and the voices of the places and the people we are mission committed to serving. Our goal is also that you leave here today, ready to exercise your curiosity, your wonder, and keep asking at the local store, on Twitter or Front Porch Forum, in your staff meetings, in your board meetings, at your breakfast table, in your classrooms, in every place you can ask the question, what does what we do today mean for Vermont at mid-century? Our hope is that you listen for what people see when they look at Vermont at 2050. What are our dreams for it? What needs to be different to get there? What can we do? What could we be? Our engagement in these conversations doesn't end here. They're only just beginning. And so on behalf of all the folks who make up the Vermont Community Foundation, thank you for joining us this afternoon on this beautiful evening and on the journey that is the course of Vermont communities. Thank you very much.